Okay guys, welcome to this video blog on fitting a Colorado Norton Works electric starter to a 750 Commando. The machine in question that you're looking at here is a 71. It's in the UK and it's a combat engine, so that's the 10:1 compression, which means it's a right bugger to start. Especially since it's recently been rebuilt. So after trying a couple of obvious things like the Makina carb conversion, you can see there, which is really cool, fits in nicely and far less temperamental than the old Amals. Also a longer kickstart, which was a somewhat obvious thing that I got from RGM over here in the UK. Which does help a tiny bit, but still makes kicking over a very hit and miss and often painful experience. Those guys who've had it backfire and been hobbling around the garage for the next 20 minutes will know exactly what I mean there. So, not wanting to give up on this lovely bike, despite having a Triumph 750 Twin that starts easy as anything, I thought, okay, next step's going to have to be an electric starter. Actually, I've skipped a step there. I did get one of these electric starts that you get in race meetings, you know, that you stick your back wheel on and sort of put it on, big electric motor. Yeah, that didn't work either. It's a good way of wearing rubber out though and spreading rubber everywhere. But basically it wouldn't turn the Norton over reliably and became a very unsafe procedure. So I ordered the kit. Ordered it from Matt at Colorado Norton Works, and this is what arrived. Okay, so literally all I've done here is just open the very well packed box. There was a bit of extra stuffing in there just to stop things moving around. And I now propose to start working my way through the box. What we've got in here, we've got the instructions, so a full set of instructions that come with it, step by step, which look pretty good. I had a read through those. There's instructions on the primary transmission, removing the chain case, etc., which is just an extract from the Norton manual. And here we've got a checklist of all the things in the kit. I ordered a black starter and the satin casing simply because, as you can see from the bike, while I like to have things nice, neat, rust free, lots of stainless, I'm not a big fan of polishing and cleaning. I do prefer to ride them when I get the chance, hence my frustration that I haven't been able to take this machine out on the road. Anyway, I'm going to start unpacking. Got my faithful helper here. She's in the way rather than helping, but hopefully we'll get by. Alright. Okay guys, welcome back. Here's all the bits unpacked now. All arrayed for you to see. I guess the thing I should have mentioned before, for those who aren't familiar with this electric starter, it actually has a belt drive as part of the kit, so you get a bit of a 2-for-1. That does help alleviate the somewhat eye-watering cost. The kit's, by the time you've got your taxes and your shipping and the government customs people, who no doubt funded their Christmas party off this, you're looking at £2,500 UK pounds and a bit more in truth. However, that's definitely the only negative here, because what you're looking at is some of the nicest produced bits I have seen in a long while. And apologies, you don't know me, but my background is I'm an engineer who puts in machine tools and treatments processes for aircraft manufacture, fighters. And as such, we tend to buy only the best machine tools and we tend to produce only the best bits. And these are up there amongst them, definitely. The quality is phenomenal. We'll just have a quick look round what we've got. The most obvious things, we've got the belt drive, a carbon belt drive. We've got a wiring harness, a relay, and a handlebar switch. I guess in the Alton kit you use the standard switch. I've got the good old-fashioned Lucas Prince of Darkness rubbish, so I'll be happy to replace that with something more reliable looking. Selection of fasteners and bits and pieces, which at the moment I don't quite know what they do, but hopefully the instructions will make clear. Then we've got some of the belt drives. Now here we have what very much looks like a hard anodized and heat treated components there, steel heat treated components in amongst the aluminium hard anodizing. Very, very nice piece of machining and treatment. Put into shame by the actual case itself, which is just phenomenal. For those who are of a machining bent, you'll be looking for all the dwell marks and such like, and you'll be struggling to find them, just as I am. So yes, very, very nicely produced. Got some intermediate gear here, assembly, and of course the primary belt drive from the front of the crankshaft, and the gear that obviously takes the drive from the starter. Talking of which, here is the starter. As I said before, I chose the sort of matte finish casing and the black starter, the idea being that hopefully the black will sort of disappear into the darkness that is the recess there where it sits, and it will be a bit less obtrusive, so it'll look more like a standard bike. There's a little machine cap here, which I'll just show you. That again, very nicely finished, and with the Colorado Norton Works logo on. Final bit, there's a clutch plate, metal clutch plate, and some seals. The clutch plate in the instruction refers to putting this in to ease the clutch action, which will always be welcome. But it also gives dire warnings about bronze clutch plates which can't be used, and makes recommendations about what clutch plates should be used, the barnet assembly being mentioned. Never had the case off, so I don't know whether this is going to mean a brief dwell when I open that lot up and find out it's already got bronze clutch plates in. Hopefully not. Okay guys, another pause here while we just clear all this away and get ready to start on the bike. Okay guys, first two steps taken now. Number one is to remove, well, just push to one side basically, the footrest and brake assembly, 3 half-inch bolts, and that's done. And the other thing you can't see from here is to drain off the case from oil. Again, all Norton owners will know this is a regular occurrence. If the bike's stand, that the oil runs into the bottom of the crankcase. 3/8 Allen key was a bit sloppy, so it was a 10mm that went in snugly, so I don't know whether that's original, and we've got a bit of a mix of imperial and metric, or whether that's somebody's put something else in later. Didn't seem to be any sign of helicoiling or else, so it looks like it may have been original, but who knows. Obviously British bikes traditionally had a lot of imperial fasteners, and it took a while before they actually began to migrate across to a purely metric. One of my other bikes here, pardon me, it's a 79 Bonnie here, largely metric. Few imperial things around, and but largely metric. Interesting little aside just before I go on and start removing the primary chain case. Sorry, I was lucky enough to go and visit Meriden around the time this bike was built in '79. I was at a university doing engineering just up the road in Coventry, and a lot of scruffy bikers, very scruffy bikers in those days, were granted an invite to go down and see the guys at Meriden. Got taken into the boardroom there and treated like kings. Every credit to those guys who were working under atrocious conditions. They all had overalls on the workshop when we went down to have a look, coats, jumpers, everything, because there was no heating. And this was towards the end of the year, which in the UK is traditionally quite wet and chilly. Couldn't afford to put the heating on. Most of the machine tools had belt drives from a roof, something I've never ever seen before or since. It's outside of a museum, and just phenomenal spirit. Really, really good guys, very experienced engineers, balancing crankshafts by hand on knife edges, for those who know what that means, with only the use of their skill and a pillar drill. So impressive. But I'm not going into the demise of the UK bike industry, that's been well documented, but sad nonetheless to see things like that go. Meriden, of course, is a housing estate. Anyway, onto the primary crankcase. Okay, well here we are with the primary chain case cover off. Really, it looks very nice in here, which is good to see. As I mentioned, I haven't really had this bike doing much with it since I got it. Got it from a dealer friend of mine who himself has had it for a good few years. And I've sort of been looking at it and thinking, yeah, one day I think we'll add that to the collection. And finally had enough pound notes to go do exactly that. So bought it a bit on the impulse. So I didn't really know what we were going to get, and he didn't have a great deal of information other than he felt it had been rebuilt earlier in its life. So anyway, yeah, everything looks good in here. I should mention actually, I'm doing things a little ass about face here. If you follow the Colorado Norton instructions, they talk about mounting the switch gear and the wiring first. But as I mentioned, I'm not really sure what's going on inside this clutch, what construction it is. So I felt I'd rather do the mechanical bits first and see if there's any other bits I need. You know, if I've got a bronze clutch in there, I'll be looking for a clutch first before I do anything else. Likewise, I'm just interested to see what this is, because again the instructions talk about maybe having a 3-phase alternator if you haven't already got one, to help the charging. Though they do say it's only probably necessary if you run with lights on all the time, which I don't tend to. So whatever, it's probably okay as is. But anyway, so yeah, thought I'd do this bit first and see how it pans out, as it's a bit more of an unknown. Hopefully that won't cause me any problems later in the build, in which case I'll have to hurriedly do the wiring first and follow on. Okay, so anyway, chain case off, is dog simple bolt that just comes out, and there is actually, I don't know if it's meant to be or not, but there is actually a little recess here on the case, if you can just see that there, which allows you to put a screwdriver in and just lever away a little bit here, which isn't something I enjoy doing, but this was really tight on. They talk about wobbling it off in instructions. Well, no way. Somebody's had some Hylamar in here by the look of it, and the rubber seal itself, which is in good condition, that was well affixed. So I really did need to just use a wide braided screwdriver and just give it a little bit of a persuasion. Okay, on to the next stage. Okay guys, the strip down of the alternator is going okay. Just thought I'd like to mention a couple of little points though, for those about to do this. Number one is the actual nut that goes on the end there of the crankshaft. As you can see by the marks on it, somebody didn't have the right socket beforehand. It talks about a 1/2 inch width in the instructions. I didn't have the right socket either, but luckily I had an air wrench, one of these beasties, and a 24mm on socket, which, while being a bit of a sloppy fit, was not that bad, and with the air wrench took it off. The instructions say you know, put the brake assembly back on, use the brake and obviously a lever, but the air wrench makes that superfluous. The other little thing I just thought I'd mention, and this is one of those things that I didn't think I'd use, but obviously have. I have a little box of sockets here. These are old sockets. They're ones that come with these kits that the family like to buy you at Christmas, thinking you'll love this, and you look at it and think, oh my god, I'm not letting that anywhere near my bikes, because the quality is so poor. However, I've found a saving grace. This one in particular, which is a 13mm, goes on that nut where nothing else I had does, because the gap here between the stator windings and the actual nut is so small that the proper sockets, which have a decent wall thickness, wouldn't go on. So these cheap ones maybe have a use after all. Wouldn't recommend using them for much else than this, but worked in this case. Okay, on with the strip down. Okay guys, another quick update. As you can see, the strip down's progressing. What might be puzzling some of you is why I'm not doing it by the book. The book says, you know, we dismantle all the clutch first, you know, taking the nuts out and that, leaving the clutch basket itself and the clutch pack in place with the chain and the primary sprocket. We then use a puller, obviously having used the spring puller, there we go, spring puller. Having used the spring puller to take the clutch apart first, we then use a engine puller to take the sprocket off. Unfortunately, while I have one in that little box there, it turns out it's got the wrong threads. And the only bolts I've got that fit those little holes in there aren't long enough to use the puller. So, as luck would have it, there was just enough slack to actually take the clutch basket off with the chain still attached to all of it, and then could take the chain off, and then I could get this somewhat large puller, hopefully you can see here, around the back of the sprocket. Yes, that was a nightmare. I had to use the soft drift, as they imply, to bang the side of the sprocket after getting a lot of torque on this this puller, which, as you can see, is very fine threaded, can exert quite a force, and it went with a bit of a bang, but it came off. I think the main problem is, if we take the puller off, this collar here was still on, and that collar is extremely tight on the shaft. I wasn't sure at the time whether it was actually part of the sprocket or not. I assumed it wasn't, but I couldn't move it, and I didn't want to put any force on it, so I thought, okay, well, it'll come off with the sprocket, which it did, but only after a lot of effort. Okay, so I'll just remove those bits and then see what we've got. Obviously there's a number of washers and stuff still to be collected here and correctly tagged and that. I'm not sure whether I'll need them or not later, but obviously we'll keep track of everything as we pull it apart. Good news is, as before, really no signs of any bodging going on here, as though it's either been very, very well maintained or not touched at all. So that's good news. Okay guys, next instalment in a moment. Okay, here we are then. Primary chain case off. A lot of gunge, but no obvious damage. which, as I say, is always pleasing to see. Just got to clean up all these faces now, and then we're at the end of the instructions from the manual, and we'll be transferring to the actual install of the kit, which obviously very excited about. Just in case anyone's wondering, by the way, the item up here is just a charging socket for the battery, just a point to plug in and keep the battery charged over the winter. Okay, I'll start cleaning up and we'll look at the reassembly now. Okay guys, all cleared up now. Gasket loosely in place after cleaning up there. There's a useful note about in the instructions about just checking the nut on the gearbox main shaft, see if it's tight. Mine wasn't. It was slightly loose. Also, it had the world's grubbiest, horriblest screw. This little beastie actually holding the lock washer in. So what I've done, I've taken a longer screw of the same thread, stainless in this case, and I've machined it down a little bit. You could hacksaw it with a file as well. The lathe just makes these things easier. And put that in so it's got more thread into the sprocket, obviously not going through too much to the other side, just a thread and a half as engineers like to see. So that locks that off better and make sure that's not going to come loose. Put a lock washer on there as well. The next stage of the process is to take the primary case, this lovely beastie here, and actually fit it on. Now, as you can see, that hasn't been going too smoothly. The felt washer here is considerably smaller than the diameter of the shaft that it has to go on, that plain boss there at the end of the main shaft. It obviously accommodates it ultimately, but initially it's quite a bit smaller. So I've been using a succession of slightly smaller and then larger sockets. That's a 3/4 inch one in there, just to go in and give it a bit of play, you know, make sure it flexes it just a little bit. This is slightly smaller. I measured it up with the vernier calipers. It's slightly smaller than the shaft diameter there, so it's not over stressing it, but hopefully when I come to now try and fit this onto the shaft, it will it will fit better. The object of this exercise at the moment is to check whether we need any more of these washers that were on there originally, whether those need to be packed out so that can be clamped up hard against that. This is actually loose on mine. I don't know, it's meant to be loose, but obviously I'm leaving it loose at this moment until I've got it all aligned and set up, and then I'll nip it up from the other side. So I'll just see if this socket idea has worked, and see if I can get the primary chain case on. Back at it, Mo. Okay guys, primary case now on. The socket idea seemed to work okay with the felt, and you know, I've got the lock nuts on now. The crankshaft seal, I looked really good. I didn't need to do that, so I've left that alone for now. Wimped out there a bit. Shimmed out the centre stud as recommended. It's left loose at the moment, so it can just be tightened up later. You can get a spanner underneath. It's 9/16 on the outside and a 15mm on the nut. Don't know what that's about, but anyway. So on to the next stage. Looking good. Okay, a mid-build recap on what's going on. Generally no problems. Fiddly things. This gear here has a bearing that's loose in this plate, so they warn you about that. You just take the tape off and the bearing comes loose. Said bearing then is very reluctant, certainly in the temperatures of today. It's December in England, hence the sound of the fan heaters running in the background. Was very reluctant then to go on to the shaft of this gear, so sat it to reasonable distance, so
about a foot or so from the fan heater for a few minutes to get it good and warm, at which point I was able to just push it on with my thumb with a little bit of application, and then put the plate on. The bearing itself is loose in the plate. Curious about that, but anyway, it is. Assembled the whole thing up then, just got to check your alternator for the clearances. All this is in the instructions, of course. Mine actually is probably the ropiest bit on the bike looking at it. It looks very original, and the actual main rotor itself had some smears of plastic, no doubt the lacquer or encapsulation here around it, where it's been picking up at some point on the inside of this. So I had to clean all that off first, make sure the inside was clean, and then do the gapping, which has gone okay. One minor thing, this screw here, this is the little beastie here. Probably wants to be at least twice that length. Barely, you know, if you look at the size of the plate, compare the plate to the screw, and bearing in mind it's got to come back off, it's barely in the plate. There's more than enough thread for it to go into the plate more. So Matt, if you're listening, make that screw about twice the length, and those of us then who like to tighten things to what my friend used to call fill torque, for those who don't know, that's as tight as you can get it plus half a turn. For those of us who like to do fill torque, we'll be reasonably confident we're not going to strip anything. But yeah, everything's gone really well so far. Not tensioned the belt. In fact, I haven't took the liberty, because my gearbox was well forward anyway. Took the liberty of not even loosening the box off or the rear wheel yet, as the instructions say. But I'll get to that stage no doubt soon to actually tighten the whole lot up. So just started on the clutch now. Put the extra plate in that they've said, and about to open my clutch up. She's sat down there at the moment, and just see what's in it. And hopefully that's in a good condition and I can carry on the build. Anyway, back in hopefully a couple of minutes. Bye now. Okay folks, this is where we've got to at the close of the first day. Starter installed. There's a little baby at the back, and as I hoped, being sort of matte black, it sort of blends in very nicely, disappears into the engine. The casings are absolutely phenomenal. I mentioned early doors that I'm familiar with aerospace engineering. Well, I have to say this is as good as, if not better. The fit and the finish is absolutely first class. Never seen anything better. So very impressed so far, very impressed indeed. A lot of setting up yet to do, though I haven't set the clutch, and I haven't, as I said, set the tension on the belt yet. So that's for another day. Overall, it's taken me probably a good 6 hours or so today, but I have been going through everything, and there's some of my bits, bits and pieces I've had to sort of clean up and stone dress, get working better. I did assemble the pack of the clutch and missed that there were still some plates inside it, so I had to do that again, so watch out for that one. Also the clutch plates were quite badly fouled, so I had to dress them as well. So it's it's all bolting together nicely, don't get me wrong, but it's more than a day's work definitely to do it, and I've still got the electrics to do. Yeah, very good, and closed for now. See you folks. Okay, well here we are at the penultimate stage. The hardware install is pretty much done. The clutch is adjusting now as per manufacturer's recommendations, and the belt has an initial adjustment. I'm probably going to look at it again in a short time after the bike's done a bit of running. I know these things don't tend to stretch, but it's just in case, because the one thing I'm not sort of clear on, it talks about having a clearance up here where the belt touches the casing, on the assumption that you can get sort of a 90-degree bend down here. Well, I can't really get a 90-degree bend down here, but I haven't got a clearance up here. So I think we'll let it run for a little while, do a couple of 100 miles and see what it looks like. Other than that, hardware-wise, install has been excellent. A lot of the shimming they talk about just hasn't been needed on my bike, which is just pot luck, I think, with the Norton's original tolerances. A little bit of time just setting up the alternator to get an even gap all around it, but that's just a case of loosening these bolts a little bit, shuffling it a little bit against the magnetic pull, nipping it up with one or two and getting it going. I've done an initial adjust on these bolts as well, but I'll do that again when the engine's actually running. At the moment I've just got the plugs out to give it a chance to sort of turn it over, or to see if it turned over. And it does. So here we go. A great moment. No problem. Absolutely tons of force. Turning it over, obviously with the plugs out, it's relatively easy anyway, but this is a rebuilt engine, so it's probably going to be the hardest challenge, a rebuilt combat engine. They don't get much worse than that. One thing I have found though is I struggled with the wiring. In the instructions it talks about the options you have for positive and negative earth. Mine's positive, so it talks about putting the fused black wire here and the straight black wire here to alternate terminals on the battery. That's not correct. If you look at how it's actually on the bike, ignore these two, they're from my charging lead, my auxiliary sort of charging lead here, that just keeps the battery topped up when it's in winter mode. These are the two wires here, and as you can see they both go to the negative terminal, and they both have to go to the negative terminal. That's because as a positive earth bike, the feed from the main power and the feed to the starter and the feed to the relay all come from the positive side and have to return through the negative. So those wires have to both go to the negative. So the instructions are actually wrong there. That took me a little bit of scratching my head, probably a bit longer than it should have done, because the install has been absolutely by the book up to that point, and you start wondering whether you're doing something wrong. But in this case, I'm afraid it's your mistake, Matt. So I'll feed that back with an email and just double check. But as you can see, nothing's burst into flames, and it does start. Oh, it does turn. So it looks like I'm right. Anyway, we are at, as I say, the penultimate stage. The next stage for me is to get the bike back together. I took the tank off to give me a chance to check all the wiring and make sure the connections weren't too bad. I have remade a few of them which were a bit grotty, and in truth the bike probably wants a new wiring loom now, because this looks original, and at sort of 40 years it's probably done its work. And I'm sure once I start riding the bike, if I keep it on like this, I'll start having broken wires and all sorts of problems. Plus there's nasty little things like this that people have done that I still haven't got around to touching up. So a few of them I've done, but there's more to be done, so we'll get a new loom at some point. But for now, the priority is to get this connected up and running. So next time I report, we should have the tank on, fuel ready to go, and the bike ready to start. Okay, cheers. And here we are at the final state. The bike's pretty much all back together again. Just got the side cover off because I need to get a better strap to hold my bigger battery in. But it's all together, and if you note the switch and the result, and there we go. I need my other hand for the throttle. Oh, hang on, no, forgot the choke. works, and it works very well. As you can see, it nestles in there really nicely. Not really seen it from the other side, guys, have you? But, this is the other view. So all fits in there really neatly. Nothing to compromise anything. Might reroute that a little bit. Not really looked at it this side myself. And of course the tri-spark there, which needs setting up. Setting the ignition once I've got the carb cleaned and set. It's the fuel in the bike has been in there quite a while. So, okay, job done. Overall conclusions: very nice piece of kit. Well worth the money. Basically, this bike hasn't run since I got it because I struggled to get it going, and now it starts on the button, which is what you want, isn't it? I think the only things I forgot to mention last time, I did mount the switch on the other side, which some people might be saying, why do you mount the switch on the other side? Simply because when I span a lever, I like to have it sort of hold the lever in front of me, which leaves this gap between the switch block and the hand grip, or the standard hand grips anyway. So that just fitted in nice there, and of course on this side there's really nowhere for it to go. So it's only intelligent really to stick it this side, I reckon. Yeah, okay, that's it. Thanks a lot for watching this, and I hope you get one of these and meet you on the road sometime. Cheers now, bye.